The hungry house. The house on Thornhill Lane stood vacant for years, its windows like hollow eyes staring out at the world. It was a beautiful Victorian manor, built in the late 1800s, but no one stayed there for long. Rumors swirled in the nearby town of Waverley about the house's cursed history, stories of strange disappearances and sudden deaths. One crisp autumn afternoon, a young couple, Sarah and Mark, decided to take a detour from their road trip and explore the infamous house. They were skeptics, laughing off the warnings from the locals at the gas station. "It's just an old house," Sarah had said, brushing her dark hair from her face. "Ghost stories are for kids." As they approached the house, they noticed the front gate was ajar, creaking slightly in the wind. The air seemed to thicken as they stepped onto the property. Mark pushed open the heavy front door, its hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the house was eerily preserved, as if frozen in time. Dust motes floated through the air, disturbed by their presence. The couple wandered through the grand foyer, admiring the intricate woodwork and stained glass windows. They moved into the parlor, where a massive chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine but shrugged it off. "It's just old," she told herself. They climbed the grand staircase, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. On the second floor, they found a nursery, its wallpaper faded but still showing playful images of animals and flowers. A small crib stood in the corner, and Sarah felt an inexplicable sadness wash over her. She turned to leave when she heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. "Leave. Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Mark shook his head, but his face had gone pale. "Let's check the attic," he suggested, hoping to distract her. The attic stairs were narrow and steep. As they climbed, the air grew colder. At the top, they found an old trunk. Inside were photographs, letters, and a journal. Sarah picked up the journal and began to read aloud. It told the story of the house's original owner, Margaret Thornhill, and her descent into madness. She had lost her only child, a baby boy, to a sudden illness, and in her grief, she had turned to dark rituals, desperate to bring him back. The final entry was a scrawled warning: "The house demands blood." A loud crash from below startled them. They rushed downstairs to find the front door shut and the chandelier swaying violently. The house seemed to breathe, the walls groaning and the floors shifting. Mark tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the house, followed by the sound of footsteps, running, thumping, coming closer. Mark and Sarah backed into a corner, clutching each other. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and a cold, menacing voice filled the room. "You shouldn't have come here." The chandelier came crashing down, narrowly missing them. The house shuddered, its malevolent presence palpable. Doors slammed open and shut, windows shattered, and the walls seemed to close in. Sarah and Mark ran to the kitchen, searching for another way out. They found a back door and burst through it, only to find themselves back in the parlor, as if the house had twisted its layout to ensnare them. Desperation turned to terror as they realized there was no escape. The house wanted them, needed them. Mark felt a searing pain in his chest and looked down to see a shadowy hand piercing his skin. He screamed, and Sarah watched in horror, as the life drained from his eyes. The shadow seemed to consume him, leaving behind only a cold, empty shell. Sarah stumbled backwards, her heart pounding in her ears. She ran through the house, the rooms warping and changing around her. Every turn brought her back to the same spot, the nursery, where the crib now rocked on its own. Desperate and breathless, she sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "What do you want?" she sobbed. The room grew colder, and she felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw the ghostly figure of Margaret Thornhill, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "The house must feed," Margaret whispered. "It keeps me here, trapped, until it is satisfied." Sarah's mind raced. "Then let me go. I'll bring others. I'll tell people to come." Margaret's expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. "It won't let you leave. It knows the taste of your fear, your despair. It has claimed you." Suddenly, the room began to shake. The walls seemed to close in, and Sarah felt an overwhelming pressure in her chest. She collapsed, gasping for breath. The last thing she saw was the crib, its ghostly occupant reaching out for her. Weeks passed, and the house on Thornhill Lane stood as silent and menacing as ever. Sarah and Mark's car was found abandoned nearby, but the couple themselves were never seen again. The townsfolk whispered about the house, the new additions to its legacy of horror. One day, a group of thrill-seekers decided to test their courage against the house. Armed with cameras and bravado, they entered the house, laughing off the warnings from the locals. They never emerged. The house on Thornhill Lane remains, a dark sentinel watching over its domain. It waits, patient and hungry, for its next visitors. For those who dare to enter, there is no escape. The house always finds a way to claim what it needs. And so, the cycle continues, the house forever feeding, forever growing stronger, on the souls of the curious and the unwary. The legend of Thornhill Lane lives on, a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, for the horrors they hold are all too real.
Dear viewers, if you like to watch the scariest horror stories, do subscribe, like and share our channel. Thank you.